That's when you're supposed to say good morning. Okay, is everybody set up and ready? Well, good morning. I am Sheriff Ian Parkinson. I've been sheriff since 2011. For those who don't know, I appreciate you being here. I'm going to try to give you some update, but there's a lot of information that I cannot share with you, and certainly at some point I will explain some of the reasons why. But I want to give you a little, I want to back up and give you a little bit of background before we begin on what's going on today. So I mentioned that I began in 2011. Well, when Kristin went missing in 1996, I was a police officer at the city of San Luis, so I was well aware of Kristin's disappearance. It was pretty big news, pretty frightening to the community. But I never met the Smarts. I knew no details of the case whatsoever until I met with the Smarts in 2009. The investigative supervisor at the DA's office asked me to meet with the Smart family, and that is what I did. It was Denise and Stan Smart. We met really over coffee, and I was campaigning. They had seen my name, they had seen my challenger's name, and they wanted to talk to me about Kristin's case. They had a lot of disappointment, as you can well imagine, with the loss of their daughter, and didn't feel that the case had moved forward at all. They asked me probably a fair amount of questions about where I planned to take it, what my thoughts were, and what I explained to them is unchanged to today. And that is, we solve cases through witnesses and evidence. It takes one or both of those in order to solve the case. Well, by that time, in 2009-10, probably a good 12 years had passed since Kristin went missing. The sheriff's office at the time had flagged all kinds of different leads and information looking for witnesses, and really a lot of that had run dry. We were getting kind of some of the old stories kind of replayed. But when I took office in 2011, what we did have is we'd had physical evidence. So we put together 3 teams. We had the FBI, we had our forensic people, and we had the Department of Justice, and they pulled out every single piece of seized evidence and went through it all. This case was very challenging from the very beginning because, as you may recall, if you know, the suspect, Paul Flores, had moved out of the dorm. The dorm room had been cleaned, so you're missing physical evidence, and you don't recreate that. You can't find it. You can find what you have. So we moved forward. I'm going to fast forward a bit. So I inherited the case when I was 14 years old, and have had it for half of its life. When I began, and we did not have a dedicated detective that could work the case, but several years later, I was able to obtain what we called an unsolved cold case detective, and that'd be Detective Clint Cole. Clint, his tenacity, the Bureau's quality of investigators, I'm not bragging when I say I think they're amazing investigators that have done a phenomenal job. This led to, obviously, Paul and Ruben's arrest several years ago. The jury convicted Paul of murder. He got sentenced to 25 years to life. During one of the post-operation or post-conviction press conferences, I had already told the Smarts, Stan and Denise, and their two other children and their families that it wasn't a finality for us. The case was not over. The reality was Kristin was still missing. Yes, there was some satisfaction with the family for justice, but these things, they never close. They give some peace, but peace would never be had until we recovered Kristin. So I vowed to them again that we would not give up the search for Kristin's remains, and it was my goal to bring Kristin home. Since that time, we've continued to work on the case. We've continued to search locations throughout probably the last couple years, and that's what led us to this past Wednesday. The detectives Clint Cole obtained a search warrant based on investigative leads and evidence to return to the Brant Street address of Susan Flores. That location has been searched twice before, at least. Officially back in '96, search warrant was obtained by the sheriff's office then. They did not locate anything. And so we're going to talk about this slightly, but I'll kind of segue to this for 1 second. Back in '96, they used ground penetrating radar, also known as GPR, in order to check all locations on the ground. The GPR from 30 years ago is not the GPR today. It's come, as you imagine, like everything advances, our cell phones, our computers, so does the science. So you know that we had GPR out there during the search. It's the same GPR and operator that we used at Ruben's house, where we located what we believe was a location that Kristin was at one time. The issue is where is Kristin? And for those that have followed it and know the case, it's been a roller coaster. There's always ups, and you think you're onto something, and then it drops to nothing. That's the way the case is, and that's not unusual for cases, but this one in particular, I remember speaking to our investigative team at one point, just saying we don't seem to ever get a break. Every time we think we have something, it collapses. I think we finally hit the high when we found the burial site at Ruben's house, but it didn't give us the answer that we were still seeking, is where is Kristin? And so that's why the search continued. I'll only mention that two things. I mentioned GPR already. It was visible for the media. It's all over the news that they were doing it, so there was no secret we were using GPR. We also are conducting soil tests, and that's kind of the scientific part. I'm not going to go into the details other than just to say with soil tests, it's about the compounds in the soil that are related to a human decomposing body. And so that is what you saw or may have seen with the canisters collecting it. The way these warrants work, just like Ruben's, as you may recall, a judge believes that we have probable cause to go look for either either Kristin or the remains of Kristin. And once we satisfy that, then it becomes a slow, methodical search. We made the agreement that internally that we are not leaving that house until we are sure that we have checked everything. And when I say everything is what is reasonable. We can't go to somebody's house regardless of what we might believe and tear up the entire house. We have to base it on next step sciences, and that's exactly what we did in Ruben's house. That's exactly what we're doing now. So the question is I think it's safe to say that we have not recovered Kristin yet, but our search goes on, and I don't know how long we're going to be there. The warrant that we obtained what's called, that we refer to as a kick-out warrant. That means the occupants of the residence, once we serve it, have to depart and cannot return to the residence. It's not unusual. You can imagine that you don't want somebody that could be a suspect in a case or who might have access to evidence destroying that once we're there, but also we don't have the ability to babysit them and basically hold them in their house, restrict them from going anywhere. So that's not uncommon. So that's what we did in this case. Susan won't be able to return until we have completed our search. Don't know if it's going to conclude today. As I mentioned, it's a methodical step each time. We get something, we go in another direction. We get something, we pursue that. And so it is, until we're done, we're done. And we plan to be there until we can walk away, either finding Kristin or all the evidence we can find and moving to the next step. I'll tell you one other thing that has been my mantra with Stan and Denise Smart, and I have a very good relationship with them. I speak to them all the time. I told them at the very beginning of the case when I came into office that I would communicate with them. They could call me anytime, that I wanted to share what I could, but just like with you, I can't share everything. We have to protect the integrity of the case. And I think sometimes people don't fully understand that. If I let out information that could jeopardize a next step or our next direction, that would be damaging. My relationship with the Smarts is I will tell you in advance so there's no surprises that we're doing something. In some cases I can be specific that we're going to a location, and others it's fairly vague until we're actually there. You guys do obviously a tremendous job of finding where we are and knowing our location and knowing what we're up to. You know that neighborhood on Branch Street. I am quite convinced that many people in that neighborhood were calling the moment we pulled up in front of that house. Totally understandable, but we still have to make sure that anything we're pursuing is not tainted or is getting out before it needs to go out where it's going to damage the future of the case. It goes for locations that we've searched before. What we don't know, and probably a simple analogy for that, is if we go and talk to a witness today and that witness says they saw nothing, they looked away when it all happened, and then we find out a week later that that was not true. They had told people that they witnessed everything. So just because somebody was interviewed, just because a location was searched, does not mean that we have checked it off our box. We have a very large county with many rural parts to it, and as you can imagine, for those who are around, probably now a dozen years ago, 10, 12 years ago, we searched the hillside outside of Cal Poly where the Big P was. That took tremendous amount of work, and we barely hit that full hillside. I mean, it was probably an eighth of that hill that we hit, based on scientific evidence that put us there. So I think when it comes to divulging certain things, I can't divulge, but understand that I have the same relationship with the family. I think the problem with this case from the very beginning was most people that had read the case believed they knew about the case. It was always, their feeling was always based on belief. And as I repeated to the Smarts many times, it's not what we believe, it's what we can prove. And that's our justice system, and that's why I think our justice system is sound. People shouldn't want law enforcement arresting somebody on a belief. There should be proof to it. So that's what makes it hard for everybody saying, I want this, I want to see that. Branch Street has particularly come up from the very beginning as a location, but when it's been searched already, we have to have new evidence in order to go back. A judge just doesn't say, well, yeah, you had the warrant, you didn't feel a thorough enough job was done back then. It's not fresh information. The information in the search warrant has to be fresh, relevant, and have the threshold of probable cause. So that's what we pursued. That's why we're there today. We arrived just before 7 on Wednesday to serve the search warrant, and we're prepared to go as long as it takes until we either find Kristin, find evidence, and are satisfied that everything has been searched. Okay, I think I'm going to open it up to questions, but I'll say it one more time. You're going to get a lot of no comments on some of this stuff because I can't. So
Thursday morning, an interview you did with a local radio host / podcaster, Mr. Ross. It was called an exclusive interview after a lot of local media was told that we weren't going to get anything else from you guys. What do you have to respond about that, and why was that given to him?
Well, as you know, being in the media, that I don't have a responsibility to do any interviews, and my intention was not to do any interviews. That was the message I gave to our PIO, Adam Montiel, who I happen to know, called me, caught me at a time that I was actually available, and I agreed to talk to him. If you listen to it, it was very, very benign, and it was about following what we had already put out in a press release. So the short answer is I chose to do it.
What new evidence prompted the search warrant?
I'll just say it was investigative and scientific information that met that threshold.
Sheriff Parkinson, can you explain some of the process or what exactly the soil scientists are doing? It's been very visible, as we've all seen. Can you just go a little bit more into detail on what they're looking for?
Well, I'm not a scientist, so I don't want to stumble. Other than the simple explanation is they put probes into the ground to read the soil under the ground. They take that back to the lab. They analyze what components are in that soil, and because the readings that they identify as strong and possessing human DNA, that's what helps them conclude that they think there might be something there or was there.
And to follow on that, is there a timeline on when you'll get results?
We're getting results a little bit day by day. It's a long process to analyze the soil. We have a local lab. They're the people that are actually analyzing it. So they've been analyzing every night since we've been there. So throughout the night, they put it in their test machines and they run it through. Then they have to look at the data. Then that data goes to the person that's going to interpret it and see that data and see if that matches the thresholds. So it's a long process. It's not as simple as just throwing it in a machine and getting results right away. I think I would say a scientific process to get to that point, and they have steps involved in order to get accurate readings and then the analyzing of it. So we've been meeting with them daily as they get results, and we'll continue to do that. Matter of fact, they have another meeting this morning.
Sheriff Parkinson, do you plan to dig up any areas of the backyard and or move the white sand and driveway with ground sand underneath that?
We plan to, well, I'll say this, we will dig anywhere that the evidence shows us. And that's why we utilize GPR to analyze that. Again, that structure's been through over the years a lot of different, add-ons. It's kind of, how do I put it? If you've ever walked in a house that's had a bunch of add-on rooms, most of the time you can tell. That backyard, as you see from, must be that photo. It's a small backyard, and it's because building came, and I'm using my hand to demonstrate where the house is. As that house moved out, that backyard shrank. And I would probably say it's 15, 20 by 30. And I was surprised. The first time I've ever been back there was Wednesday morning. I've seen photos, but we have not been back to that backyard in my tenure. So it's a very small area back there to search. But also, as you can see, it's quite crowded with stuff. And every time we do a scan, we have to relocate all that stuff so we get a clean scan. We're at the operator of the GPR's will to tell us what they see or what they want, and it's our job to accommodate. So, at any given time, you've probably seen we've had, anywhere from 5 to 10 investigators out there, because they are the moving company for the GPR. Whatever they want is what we want, and they know clearly that our direction is you will not. We will do anything it takes to make sure that we have done a complete, thorough search.
One more question about searches. You said on the Adam podcast that the Sheriff's Office completed another search since Flores' conviction. When was that search? What was the scope, and what brought that about?
Well, the location I'm not going to disclose, because as I mentioned earlier, until we have Kristin, everything is still wide open. The search was based on investigative leads and electronic information that we had obtained through search warrants. But beyond the location and such, it's not unusual. I think if you look at the history of this case, just since my time, 15 years, we had all kinds of search locations that we did. Extensive ones tended to be more on the radar for people. You guys heard about it, public saw it, and it was in the news. But we did a lot of searches, but we have not divulged a lot of search locations even to this point, because we don't know if we're going to go back there. And until we recover Kristin, everything is still open. And even if we searched it once, we might have missed an area 10 feet away from it. We're not talking about a large area, as in Kristin's body. We're talking about a large area to search. So we really will not provide information as to specifically where we searched. It was simply that, yes, we have searched.
Sure, it sounds like you talked about returning to a location, like Ruben's home could theoretically be searched once again.
Absolutely. Anything is open. Kristin has been moved, and we don't know how many times she's been moved and to where she's moved. And so just because somebody's house was searched doesn't mean that we're not going back there, because she could have been moved back there thinking that it's a safe place. We don't know. We obviously have not received cooperation from the Smarts, and so where she is now, we don't know.
Sheriff Parkinson, can you explain the investigation that's also happening over at the neighboring residence on East Branch Street and how that ties in?
Yes, I'll tell you, we have a search warrant for the neighboring house, exterior, not interior. The residents are extremely cooperative. The property owner is extremely cooperative and has been for some time. The search in that area is to have clean access to the other side of the fence, which is soil, where we take readings. We would have had full cooperation to do that, but it's a policy to get a search warrant just in case something changes down the road where, somebody says, no, I didn't give full permission. A search warrant covers that. So the search warrant had nothing to do with their level of cooperation, because they have been extremely cooperative with us. As a matter of fact, the soil has been sampled there on that side of the fence over the last couple of years. And that was based on their consent.
And is Susan at this point considered a person of interest, or is she allowed to leave the state or the area at all as a part of this search warrant?
I would say to the first part, yes, she's a person of interest, as always has been. As far as her ability to leave, no, we have no lawful reason to detain her at this point, so we can't control that.
Can you speak on the statute of limitations for any charges that can still be brought against either Ruben or Susan in this case?
Well, I think an example of that is what we did when we prosecuted Paul. We prosecuted Ruben as an accessory. Obviously, you saw that there was parts that could be introduced in Paul's case in chief by the San Luis DA's office, and there was stuff that could not be introduced in Ruben's case. So the fact is that she can still be prosecuted as an accessory if we can make that link, just like we did with Ruben. The part on Ruben, he can't be tried twice for the same thing. So unless there's another charge, it's double jeopardy. He was acquitted, and so unless there's another charge determined or more evidence that says, we can prove that he did, X, we can't. But I kind of leave that up to the DA's office, and if we uncover more information and there's a prosecutable case, then I am quite convinced they will prosecute.
Sheriff, can you clarify Detective Cole's role? I mean, I know he retired a couple years ago, but is he back on the case as lead detective, or exactly what's his involvement officially?
Sure. Yeah. No, I didn't agree to let Detective Cole leave, and not that that means much, except that he's done an outstanding job. you gotta remember the toll these types of cases take on the investigators. You know, and I'm talking about a deputy sheriff on the street that goes to a domestic violence call that sees somebody that's been victimized over and over again. They carry that with them. But now when you're talking about a child, you know, and Kristin truly was still a child, is gone, and you're in charge, and you got the sheriff who's got 4 layers of chain of command between that investigator and you, and the sheriff's calling you, going to your office, having you come and brief on progress. It's a lot of pressure, you know, it truly is. And there's a lot of emotion goes, and Clint's had a full career. He picked his jump off spot after the conviction and said, I just need to take a break. Fortunately for me and fortunately for us, he called and said he wanted to come back part-time to continue working on some of the cold cases that he's working on. So I gladly brought him back, and he picked up pretty much where he had left off. I kind of gave him a long vacation, but part-time, you know, generally equates to 20 hours a week, but there's times that Clint is working more hours in 1 week than our regular investigators when he's on something that he needs to continue on. So I don't know how long I'm going to keep him this time, but he's going to see, you know, everything he can through and make sure he's in a good spot.
Is he lead detective, or is there a role of somebody else lead detective? Or?
He is still lead detective. When he retired, a new detective was selected to do that. That detective had left or been out, and so that's when we brought Clint back. But Clint is the lead detective. But as you saw, most of the people out there at Susan's house were all part of our major crimes unit, and so we very much take the team approach. It's not one person that you know that does this, and so everybody is assigned a responsibility, and they kind of divide and conquer that as a team.
Sheriff, just going back to the search warrant, can you tell us if there were any eyewitness accounts or interviews that led to those being processed?
Just to clarify, when you say eyewitness accounts, somebody saw something happen at the house?
Or anything, yeah.
I would say that there was information that was derived from what we have to deem as a witness. So yes, there was some information, but not in the context of I saw this happen. They contributed to it by information that they provided it that makes them a witness.
And that's with new information?
So there was what I'd have to classify as a witness, non-law enforcement personnel that provided information that helped.
Sheriff Parkinson, can you share what's being done inside the home? I know GPR and soil testing is being outside, but what are you guys doing inside?
I'll share that first. You know, a search warrant means that you go through everything, papers, any device that we can find and locate. So that's kind of that, when I said earlier, kind of divide and conquer. You might have people that are just in charge of one thing, and that's all they're doing is searching that one thing. But inside specifically, so you have a full search of every single item in the house, inside out. We did do GPR inside the house as well. Obviously, you wouldn't see that because it's inside. Any location that we wanted to, that we could access, and there was a reason behind it, we GPR'd.
And for the team testing the soil and receiving those updates, are you able to share at all if those updates have been fruitful or what you're learning from those updates?
I'd say yes, they're fruitful. Yes, that we're getting some positive results, and consistent with what the science tells them, and consistent with certain locations that we have continued to focus on.
And are they testing the same spots or locations that have previously been tested?
When you say previously been tested, when?
Have they done the soil testing previously during previous search warrants?
No. No soil testing has been previously done to my knowledge. The previous testing to the warrant was off the florist's property. It was not on their property. So the evidence let us trail to the property. And so now with the warrant, we're getting it all throughout the property. And then they're analyzing to determine, is it strong? Is it weak? What is it? Much like you would do any other soil test for, for oil, in the ground. So, but this is specific to human decomposition.
When you say it's positive results, are you saying that they're getting results that they as scientists, based on their science, believe are consistent with human remains present?
Correct.
Sheriff Ferguson, you mentioned that some of the influence for getting this warrant now was improved technology. Did the science teams, the soil science teams' forthcoming study that's under peer review influence the sheriff's office ability to secure a search warrant at this time?
Well, I would say this: it's a piece of the puzzle, and it's just like witnesses, they help give us the answers and tie it together. Certainly, when it comes to the samples, it's a piece of it. It helps guide us, just like GPR guides us. GPR is not conclusive. It tells us there's something strange there. And if you may recall, this was introduced during the trial, during testimony on the GPR. The operator identified locations of anomalies. In the particular place that we believe Kristin was, that was the anomaly that he identified that he was most interested in based on the results he saw. But remember, GPR is showing unusual things. It's showing things that that are of interest. It's not necessarily evidence. It is leading us to that path. And so when you talk about soil, I look at it much the same. It's leading us in a direction, but it's not proof necessarily that we could only rely on. We have to rely on other stuff.
Sheriff Parkinson, given the community's intense interest in this case, what can the community do to best support your deputies and maintain the integrity of the investigation?
I would say a couple things. Number one, obviously report anything that they find unusual. It's extremely important that any new information that might come in, we have people out there that have sat on information. We have people out there that saw something and they just didn't supply it because they didn't think it was worthwhile. So anything that they see that they can present to us would be extremely beneficial. Second, I would say, don't jump to conclusions. I've reminded the Smarts of this because it's been such a roller coaster ride with them, that when we go to do something and I tell them we're going to do something, manage your expectations, because we don't know. And we've been through this so many times where we're riding that coaster up and then all of a sudden it drops off. And so I have to kind of keep reminding them of that. And even though they know that intuitively, it's easy to get your hopes up. And so the public is much the same. Manage your expectations. We're doing everything systematically, and if it doesn't net the results we want, we have done a great job of changing the direction and moving on to something else and pursuing that till the end. And that's what we'll continue to do. Ideally, we recover Kristin. Ideally, we would have had Kristin a long time ago. But ideally, we recover Kristin, and then we can bring some peace to the family and by recovering Kristin. But the reality is we're not in the business of dropping our head and walking away. That's not our mission. That's not what we intend to do. So it's managing our own expectations as well. When you hear something, you get excited, and all of a sudden it ends up into nothing. And so that's kind of the case. So the public has to do the same thing. They might believe something, they might think that it's true, but it's not provable and it's not true. And so it saves us a tremendous amount of time when we don't get a whole bunch of information from people that have their own theories. We have very good investigators, and they've done an amazing job piecing things together, and we just got to let them do their job and be patient. And trust me that nobody involved in this case wants Kristin brought home more than we do. And we're going to do everything possible to do that. And that's the peace of mind they should have, is that this has continued. It did not end at conviction, and it will continue until, we absolutely have nowhere to go and or we find Kristin.
Sheriff Parkinson, it looks like there were carts hung up this morning on the scene. Can you tell us the purpose or significance of those carts?
You have a camera out there?
I have a reporter out there.
Well, as you know from the Rubens house search, there's certain things that we want to shield from view. So I think it's probably safe to say that what we're doing is sealing it from public view. And it's not something is being hidden. It's the fact that we don't want people guessing what we're doing. We need to work in peace, and that's what they're doing now.
Can you tell us anything else about the search today? What time it will continue? How long?
They're doing a lot of work and prep. I can say that the way the search warrant like this works is exactly the way it works with Rubens. We get an order from a judge to go search a piece of property. We're looking for something that is unusual. In Rubens' case, we found something unusual that we felt was supported by GPR. We have to get then what's called a piggyback warrant. We got to get another search warrant. A lot of these cases will end in multiple search warrants. So you got to pause. Investigators got to go get a new search warrant giving us permission to do something else, more intrusive than a normal search warrant. So a search warrant on value, and this is something is a misnomer. People always ask, well, why didn't 96 they just tear up all the concrete? Well, that's not the way a warrant works. A judge is giving you permission to do certain things. You have to find probable cause to do the next step. Naturally, we don't want somebody coming in and just destroying an entire house without any cause. And so it requires a step-by-step process. And in this particular case, you're going to see some delays, possibly like you did with Rubens. There was delays that we had the house. We had to wait half a day because we had to author another search warrant. We had to get it signed, and then you have to plan what you're doing, what activity is that. So
if there's any digging, that would require another piggyback warrant?
yes.
Sheriff, I got a follow-up. There was a couple questions about the fruitful testing results. It sounds like you believe either A, Kristin, the remains may still be there, or were there at one time?
Correct.
Sure.
Well, let me say one other part of that, Dave, is that we believe that based on what we're looking at evidence-wise, scientific evidence, that a human remains were there at one time or still there. So we can't call it Kristin, but we think there's evidence to support human remains there at one time.
Back in 2014, some, I guess there's people had done similar soil testing for human decomposition on pad back. Does that have any, and he came up with a positive or a weak positive for human decom at that time. Do those searches and those results that they came up with play into today's investigation at all?
No, and I'll tell you why. First, Dr. Vass is an expert in soil. They used a similar method where they used a canine. Unfortunately, the canine was not certified, which is a requirement that we have to divulge to a judge. And two, the rumor was that he was identifying it as human remains. The factual evidence from the report said it was essentially inconclusive. It could be, it could not be. I think, again, the science has advanced. The people that have been focused on it, that are experts working in that field, have been teamed up and working on this, and so it's different. It's same in theory, but it's different from what it is today. So that didn't aid us at all. What we have is results, and so I would say for me, you can't go to a judge and say we think, based on the science that says there has to be some fact that we can articulate to the judge that is supported through either testimony or something to support that. And so I think as the time has evolved, I think that's what this group has been focused on. And that's why we're in a different situation, even though there's similarities to the way it happened back then.
Could I clarify the timeline? You said positive results, the scientists show positive results consistent with human decomposition. The positive results that led to this search warrant and additional positive results as part of this search this week.
Yes.
In the past 2 days, you had additional positive results.
Yes.
To confirm that.
Yes. So I guess the easiest way to explain it, at least the way it was explained to me, Chris, is that you get your results, and where they sit on, and I'll call it a spectrum, so that's not a scientific term, that's just my term. Where it sits, if it's maybe, let's call it mid-range, you could say that, well, it could be this, it could be that, maybe similar to what Dr. Bass discovered. When it's up here, that's when the results become more. So it's kind of like saying, well, there's a 50% chance, or there's a 90% chance, and that's what the science supports. So the kind of the short answer to your question, even though it didn't sound short, is that on the opposite wall or property, they had positive results. So the mission is to soil test on the property and find out where that source was. It's not just in every part of the soil, so they could test one area and come back and there's like nothing. And then they find another where it's, wow, this is positive, very strong. So that's kind of what's helping lead us with this. And again, it's a piece of the puzzle. We try to use as many, I guess, sciences available to us as possible, or technology too.
How strong are the positive results you've gotten from this current?
I don't know, and I couldn't quantify it because it hasn't not been quantified that way. I'm trying to explain it to where people understand it. So they're the ones who tell us it's very strong, very positive, and that's the way we've kind of operated over the last couple of years with them.
Who is the soil scientist? Can you tell us the name of the
I can't.
Company,
I can't right now. I'm sure maybe when we've concluded we will, but we're not going to divulge that right now.
Sure. Just looking at the pictures you've released, obviously what appears to be the garage is a consistent slab. The backyard appears to have bricks. Would removal of bricks without destroying concrete be something that you were able to do within the scope of the current warrant?
Yeah, so you're talking about this brick pattern, being able to pull up the bricks and test the soil? Absolutely. Obviously, you have hardened concrete. That structure, I believe, we have all the records on the house. It was pre Kristin's disappearance, as I recall. But as the GPR operator tells us, scientist that operates it, it's he's obviously educated and skilled in that area. Going through concrete for GPR is not an issue. So if we see an anomaly underneath that layer of concrete, he should see that anomaly on his evaluations. And again, that process is, I can tell you again, in his example with Rubens, when he came out, he did all of his stuff. He had to go back to his hotel room and then analyze everything. And the next morning is when he came back and we met with him and he said, here are the locations that I see anomalies. This is where I suggest you check. But this location, which ended up being where we believe Kristin was buried because of the human blood and decomp, that location is what I'm most interested in. These other ones, we have to check them out. So anything that they might find, if it was, soil samples removed, bricks, that's fairly non-invasive. But if we had to hole or a saw cut, cement cut that any areas of concrete, we have to have a probable cause to say we think there's something there. And so that's why it's very slow and methodical.
Let me ask directly, at this time as you stand there, are you aware of any new anomalies being discovered by that ground rig up since this search has begun?
What do you mean? Was there any anomalies?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, and we're focused on those and identifying what they are. As you know, probably with GPR, is that you might pick up a sewer line underneath. That's an anomaly technically. Then he has to analyze it to say, it's consistent with and because that's a lot of the use of GPR. So yeah, they find anomalies, and that's their job. But they have to analyze and say, this is the size of a sewer, sewer line, or or in-ground plumbing. Takes some work, that's for sure.
Sheriff, just one other clarification. Back in 2021, Susan did an impromptu interview with Megan Healy at KSD Wyatt, and she mentioned that she'd never spoken to you. It sounded like maybe she was open to that with the presence of an attorney. Are you open to direct communication with Susan, that she's comfortable with that?
Oh, we've always been. I don't believe that statement. We tried to talk to her numerous times, and normally it ends with some choice words. We attempted to talk to her again today. We did have some, on Wednesday. The investigators did have some dialogue, but it's pretty limited. It's been consistent that way with the family, across the board. But no, she's never been willing to sit down with us, never been willing to communicate with us, short of, very, very short things, and most of the time it's not about the case, it's about us.
I should ask this question, the obvious one. Have you tried to go back Paul and ask him flat out where's Kristin again recently?
Yes, we've talked to Paul several times. Paul, as you probably are aware, is going through the appeal process. He's exhausted. The Court of Appeals, upheld it. California Supreme Court reviewed and refused to hear it. And I think he's got a writ that goes to the court. And my understanding is once that writ has been reviewed, and if they continue to uphold it, which we suspect they will, his appeals are over. So maybe that will change, that he's willing to talk to us, but it's always a part of our investigation.
Sheriff Parkinson, if you and your team were to find something that would justify getting the other warrant to start digging, is that something that your team would do while you're still on site with this current investigation, or would you have to go back at a different time?
No, we're not leaving that house until we've exhausted everything. So the answer is that yes, we have a search warrant to be there. We find something, we go get another search warrant specific to what we're doing, like what our activity is. If we wanted to rip out 2 walls, we're going to play it safe. We're going to get a judge to give us authority to do that, but we're going to maintain control of the house until that warrant is specific, because we still have a search warrant. It doesn't replace the previous search warrant. It's a specific addition to that area, just like a addendum to the warrant in a sense, because you don't typically have to recreate the whole warrant. It's from X point on that you have to explain to the judge of what you want to do, why you want to do it, and what evidence you have that might support that.
Sheriff, what evidence would warrant potentially at the end of this investigation would warrant an arrest of Susan?
I would say it's hard to say that, because it's probably, I can imagine all kinds of things. If obviously we found Kristin, that could warrant arrest and prosecution. But I would consult, if we reached a level of evidence, let's say without Kristin, that I believed and our investigators believe reached that threshold of prosecution, I would meet with DA Dow, have that discussion. Ultimately, that would be his decision. We have authority to arrest, but he has authority over prosecution, and so we would have to literally be comfortable that he was ready to move forward. And I can tell you, even going back to Paul and Ruben's original arrest, I had a ton of dialogue with DA Dow and trying to prep them and ensure that when we made an arrest is going to prosecute, because it wasn't. There's no value in arresting somebody if the DA says it's not enough, I'm not going to prosecute that. They just get released, and we've wasted our time. So it would have to be an evaluation on what is actually present, and is the totality of it meet that threshold, that he can prosecute it, and then it was ultimately his decision before we did anything.
Sure, Parkinson. You mentioned earlier that throughout like, the course of the investigation so far, it seems like, or it doesn't seem like you guys are getting a break. Does this part of the investigation of this search warrant feel different to you?
No, I think it's very similar to what we've done before. This is the challenge, is that the boots on the ground investigators there have a lot to do, and sometimes even when there's a lull, there's discussions on evaluating other things. So there's no real break, and then you have you go home. Imagine you're an investigator and you're going home after a full day of doing this, and your mind starts going, what about this? What about that? I can tell you, the other night I was on the phone with Detective Cole until 10 at night, discussing things that we found were interesting or odd. And it kind of reached the point, I was actually telling my PIO this, that it kind of reached the point where, okay, we understand this is the direction we want to look at, and we put all the pieces in place, but it's 10 o'clock at night, nobody's giving us the answers right now, so we need to get some sleep, and that's how they go, and that's how the investigators handle it. They take it home, they think it through, they might wake up at 2 in the morning, like many of us do, and their mind starts going, and then you're up and you're on it. So it's not just the day, it becomes to be a 24-hour cycle, and so it takes it out of you.
Then one last question on the maybe Julie.
I thought you said the last one was the last question. Kidding.
Are you aware of Susan's claim to have a manuscript or book about her experiences? And if such a thing exists, would something like that be subject to the scope of the current warrant?
Yes, if an item like that existed and it had writings of, specific to the case, yes, that could be, that would be part of a warrant that we could seize that item. And certainly when I say the division of duties and the focus on certain things, it takes a lot. Think about your own house and where all your paperwork is. It's going to take a while to go through, particularly when you're not familiar with what you're looking at and trying to decipher, read everything, find out that there's value. So it takes quite a bit of time to do. But there is definitely a focus for anything in writing, in that respect. Great question. I don't have a great answer. The bottom line is, if the evidence takes us to the tomorrow, to the next day, we're prepared for that. And I don't really know the answer to that because we haven't reached that point yet. We're focused on stuff that might lead us to future days. It might end it for what we've either seen and collected to that point. So. It's kind of hour by hour. I get briefed on what they had. Just before this, I got another briefing, and it's all day, and it could be, hey, we're about at the end, and then it's like, nope, we're just went another direction. So that's why we kind of anticipated, that we could be rolling through the weekend. We just don't know yet, and there's no. Everybody that's there is committed to know that their weekend doesn't begin on Friday. It's whenever the job is done, and they'll get their break. Okay, well, thank you for coming, and I will certainly have something when we conclude our warrant. Just don't know what it is yet. Okay.
Are you anticipating just a press release or press conference depending on circumstances?
That's properly put, yeah. So